Okay, let's get started. Let me go ahead and get you guys checked in. You can each give me your names if you represent.
I'm John Meyer. I'm with Ray Meyer Sign Company. Address 8942 Glendale Milford Road, 45140.
Okay. Welcome.
I'm John Shank with CBRE at 201 East 5th Street,
Shank, SCH.
ENK. And we're both acting as agents for dark points.
All right. Well, so we also have in the back Sean. Welcome.
Let me know if I'm going to come up there.
It's up to you. Eventually, you're going to come up here. So whatever you want to do. All right. I'm going to read through our hearing script, which will basically just cover the procedure of the hearing, and then we will go ahead and get started. As already mentioned, we are recording this. All the recording kept on file. Sandra, you there? I don't know why I keep being on this host here. Oh, that's frustrating. Sorry, guys.
That's right.
Technology, right?
I know, right?
How long are you guys going to keep doing Zoom meetings like this?
I was hoping for a full house.
I think there hasn't really been for the zoning hearing format. I think people are liking virtual format.
Yeah.
It's kind of giving them more flexibility.
You folks actually get on the live stream.
Sometimes
Yeah.
neighbors will, like, either don't want to comment positively or negatively, or don't want to watch.
Yeah, we can do more going to.
Any residents downtown can join.
Anybody that wants to. Yeah.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, now we are recording. This is the February 22nd, 2023 session of the zoning hearing exam docket. I'm just going to start getting the zoning hearing exam of the city of Cincinnati. I'll be presiding over this hearing. The case before us today is the case number ZH20230009. The purpose of this hearing is to allow applicants and opposing parties to testify and to offer reviewed evidence and testimony. This hearing will follow the rules found in the zoning code and supplementary rules of the zoning hearing examiner. All testimony and evidence that an applicant or opposing party wishes to offer must be presented at this hearing. The hearing will proceed as follows: the applicant's attorney, or the applicant's agent will first present the applicant's case. If there were anyone here from the public, they would have an opportunity to speak after the applicant has presented his case. I will give Matt Shad, the zoning examiner, an opportunity to provide his testimony in addition to his staff report. In the event that he testifies or offers argument in opposition to this application, the applicant will have an opportunity to rebut that testimony which you are offering opposition. And then finally, the applicant will have an opportunity to make closing statements. After all presentations have been made, I'll close the hearing. Decisions may be expected within 2 weeks. So for our purposes here today, guys, I'll let you guys tell me about this project, why you think I should grant relief, and background things important, that sort of thing. I'll ask some questions along the way to orient that presentation however you want, or you can speak, or you can speak in whatever order you like. I'll go to Matt, let him tell me some more about the project, the staff report, and his recommendation. You can respond to anything that I said, maybe closing remarks, and we'll wrap it up.
Do you actually ask any questions, or you just listen to us?
I do both. Okay. I may limit or exclude any testimony that may be irrelevant or outside the scope of the application being considered. I may interrupt any speaker, ask questions, or make comments, and I also refuse to consider hearsay testimony that's generally evidence you want to introduce the consistent statements made by someone who's not present at this hearing. In the event of any technical difficulties, as we've seen over here already, I'll do my best to troubleshoot those on the fly. But to the extent there's any defect, for instance, from the employee going forward this hearing, I may continue those from the hearing by discretion. Okay. Last thing I need to do is just swear in all of our witnesses. So if you intend on providing any testimony here today or asking questions or anything that would strictly observing, the zoning code requires me to swear you. So if that's you, you could raise your right hand or you got one answer out loud. You solemnly swear the testimony you shall be able to retrieve the whole truth and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Okay, great. All right, guys. Who's going to be taking over here? All right. John,
Yeah, so,
Yours.
well, the reason we're here today is to request a variance for Dark Points. Dark Points is a Cincinnati-based firm. They're headquartered out of Dallas, Texas. They are a little bit under the radar as far as publicity goes, given the nature of their business. They're a data center here in Cincinnati. They occupy about roughly close to a full floor, which equates to just about 17,500 feet at a building on the western corridor of downtown at 302 West 3rd Street. In connection with their their lease renewal at the building, they are looking to install a projection sign, blade sign, on the 4th level of the building. And the reason we're here today is to request support approval for 2 variances on the location of that sign and given in its size. And we've brought a number of examples to speak about, but first and foremost, I think it's important to state that we've got a statement of support from the landlord to erect this sign in connection with the renewal. I have been given approval to share some of their clients in Cincinnati, which I just think because they're a data center, if you know how a data center works, it's, you have some portion of office space, but they handle, the IT and data collection and security for a lot of major companies in Cincinnati and the tri-state. So they're not a company that's very public about that. But there are a couple of greater Cincinnati names that I think I should mention, such as KMK Law, Greater Cincinnati Foundation, YMCA Cincinnati, the Indiana Supreme Court, Bethany House, just a couple that, shows their involvement within the community. As far as the statement of support goes, the landlord, Time Equities out of New York, owns the building. The building, for your information, is roughly about 150,000 square feet plus or minus, basically right on the western corridor of 3rd Street and Plum. And it's a multi-tenanted building. BHDP is a tenant in that building. WPP is also a major tenant in that building. WPP, or also known as Gray, has crown signage on the building. But other than that, for exterior signage, there's a blade monument sign on the back of the building, which can't be seen from any public bypass. And so the reason for this sign is to get some recognition from the city of Cincinnati that they're present there. The reason we'd like to get a variance on the location of the sign is because I believe the code states that it would need to be below the 3rd story. But in this case, if you're familiar with the building, the on-ramp to I-75 basically runs on the corner of that building. And so anything below the 3rd level, you couldn't see it because of that expressway ramp. So on the 4th level, it would have visibility from folks walking on 3rd Street and from the expressway ramp as well. We're asking for a variance on the size because I think the code states a maximum of 8 feet. If it was less than or 8 feet, it wouldn't be distinguishable at a distance. So we're requesting that variance as well. For reasons within the city, it seems like there's a lot of great examples we can talk through to show you for signs that have been approved that are similar to what we're asking for. And I don't know, John, if that makes sense to go through those, or do you want to add anything? Yes.
Do you have any questions at this point?
Just to confirm, this, you want the location of the sign to be on the 4th story, or which is on the same level as the 4th story?
So they occupy the 4th floor of this building. by happenstance, but they want it to be on the fourth level because the expressway would limit the ability to see it if there was anything lower than that.
We were really basically asking for it. There's a rendering in the packet that shows the location. And that's pretty much where we determined where that location needs to be. It's pretty close to being to scale. So it does put it, above the third at the fourth floor level.
Okay. And is there a rationale behind this signage is just simply for branding and
So
it's not advertising? Just
it's
tell me more about that.
well, advertising and branding are, I guess, maybe in the same circle. They have a lot of visitors to their building that come in. As a data center, they're always working with new companies in Greater Cincinnati, and so they have a lot of on a daily basis folks visiting that building to come up to their data center floor, not only to look at their facility, but really to look at the operation as potentially partnering with them for their data security needs. So I think given that that building is on the western corner of downtown, if you're familiar with the office market in downtown Cincinnati, that western corridor, particularly west of Elm Street, it's pretty desolate from a walkability standpoint. You have parking, and you've got mostly residential buildings. And so as kind of a standalone office building right on the southwestern corner of the city, that building is directionally hard to find. And so like any sign, it has a purpose of wayfinding. And so given that they've got a lot of folks coming in and out, that is a particular reason to show that dark points exist in the building, and for their customers to find the building and notice that they have a presence within Greater Cincinnati. As part of their commitment to Cincinnati, we just finalized their lease extension at the building. So, they're in turn doubling down on Cincinnati and are investing 15 more years of lease term to be at that building. And a big part of their growth in Cincinnati and the region, for your information, they had a data center up in Blue Ash as well, and they consolidated it down to downtown Cincinnati, given that it's really the hub of the city and the region. But with that investment in Cincinnati, they'd like to continue to grow their client base and their presence in Cincinnati. And the sign, Cyrus One has that building just north, 2 blocks north. That's the data center that I think was Cincinnati-ville. And it's got maybe 4, marquee crown signages. I think as they grow their presence in Cincinnati, some recognition is important. And,
You said recognition, what do you mean? Like,
brand recognition through the form of a signage placement within the city is important to them. And that way, when folks come into Cincinnati, the placement of that sign is important because you can see it from the I-75 ramp, similar as you can to, Paycor's new logo branding on the Paycor Stadium, or similar to the SHP blade sign on 312 Plum, which is across the street, which also needed a variance. So that placement is important, and that the fact that they want branding is important because they want to grow their customer base and show Cincinnati, hey, we exist. If that makes sense.
yeah, okay. Let's see, did you say you had some other examples? Was it just the Cyrus and the Paycor?
We have in our package, we've actually had 3 decisions by this board that closely resemble what we're asking for in the CBD.
The first of which is the Courtyard Hotel on 4th Street there at the Ingles building. That was a blade sign, a projecting blade sign that needed a size variance and height variance.
Much larger sign than what we're asking for.
So that, if you look at the photo there, that is on the 4th and 5th level. Furthermore, we've got another example that was similarly approved for the Homewood Suites, which is on Vine Street, which was the old Cincinnati Inquirer building, sitting right there next to 600 Vine. They got a size variance.
Very large one for two 26-foot tall signs above the 3rd floor level.
With, where on Vine Street, is that the one?
It's the Hampton Inn and the Fairfield Inn Suites.
What's the address?
601 Vine Street. Actually, it's Homewood Suites and Hampton Inn Suites.
On that packet.
And I've got the decisions of the zoning hearing examiner that they were all approved.
It's like halfway through the packet. And
At the bottom of this picture, with the picture attached, it's halfway through, you said?
Yeah, so at the last, we'll get to the end of the packet. There's a couple examples we can talk to, but we put the full.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, there's more text than that. But so number 1 would be the courtyard there on 4th Street, and then number 2, what we're on now, is the Homewood Suites on Vine Street. And I think a good point to why they were approved is, wayfinding, especially, but branding and advertising is a key component to, anybody, particularly a hotel. In the same way, Dark Points has out-of-town visitors coming in who are maybe not in Cincinnati, but can utilize their IT infrastructure, because they're based in Lexington or Louisville. They're close enough to where they can be clients, and so that not only for out-of-town visitors just to know where they are, but also for the local companies in the region, and also for brand recognition that, hey, we do exist in Greater Cincinnati. Lastly, the Renaissance Hotel, I'm sure you're familiar on 4th Street there, right there on the corner of Walnut and 4th. There was a size variance. And then if we could go to the end of the packet, I put on a couple of good examples of similar office tenant projects that were approved. So SHP is a great one. That building, 312 Plum, is a multi-tenant office building. I'm on this.
Yep, I'm there.
So SHP, it's a little hard to see, but it's on the 4th level. It's that blue sign sitting basically on the corner of the 4th level of the building. It's a little small there. But that was SHP is a similar size. They're an architecture firm. They're a similar size tenant in that building relative to 312 Plum's size as a building compared to 302 West 3rd, where Dark Points is. Dark Points has a much higher ratio of leased space than SHP does as a tenant in those respective buildings. So in this case, SHP was granted the variance there, similar to what we're asking for. And in the same fashion, it's a blade sign. The reason why we're asking for a blade sign in particular is because if it was a wall-mounted sign, flat face on the building, it wouldn't be able to be seen, because if you have pedestrians walking on 3rd Street, you couldn't see, sitting flat on the facade that Dark Points is there, nor could you if you were, on the on-ramp. So that's why it's important to be a blade, similar to SHP. Moving on, I just put a photo of the front of 312 Plum. Cow is a major tenant there. Currently, they have the marquee crown signage similar to Gray at 302 West 3rd. And so 312 Plum has a marquee crown sign like as Cal. SHP is the blade sign. In like fashion, at 302, we're asking for the blade sign for dark points, while Gray has the marquee crown sign. 312 Elm, moving on, everybody knows that building to be the Inquirer building. You know, they were very overloaded for exterior signage. Obviously, they were a major tenant of that building at R, but you know, we felt the precedent has been set that there isn't a cap on signage, given the fact that some tenants have, you know, an excess amount. Given we're asking for one blade sign. In addition to that, at the Inquirer building, USI Insurance, they're a tenant there. They got a blade sign on the first floor on Elm Street, and it is the photo above the Foundry, if you're following me. So that blade sign, you know, not huge, but Inquirer has multiple slots for crown signage. USI got a blade sign down at the ground level. The reason why we need to change the variance, get the variance for this location we covered because the expressway wants that. At the Foundry, if we're all familiar with that on Fountain Square, that was, you know, a major project that 3CBC ran, and it's been a big success with new tenants, Turner, Deloitte, and Divisions Maintenance. Divisions, as the anchor tenant, they are getting exterior signage as well. Not shown in the photo because it's still under construction. But we wanted to show you that in addition to the major signage that Divisions will be getting and what is existing on the top of the building, with Fifth Third, Deloitte has a blade sign there. And in similar fashion, we're asking for a blade. Obviously, it's a four-story building, but there's three on this side. And so, you know, as far as placement goes, they didn't try and go above the third level.
So Deloitte is getting the blade sign on the Foundry.
It exists right there. You can.
Oh, yeah, okay, I see.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to mention that right down is the Jeff Ruby sign. Is on that same side of that building. It's much larger. And I'm not sure what the approval process was for that, but it's a monster sign that's on the side of that building for Ruby's restaurant.
Is that only 2%?
Yeah, I think that was a special. Yeah. So I think the next photo is a really great example of almost exactly what we're looking for. I don't know if you can. Yeah. So Curiosity, 35 East 7th, multi-tenant office building, right there. And you know, as you can see, it's a historic building, but the modification, you know, for a major tenant there being Curiosity, I believe they're a creative marketing agency firm. I could be wrong, but they got a variance on the size and placement as well. They're not a ground floor tenant. Octo is, and so you know they went ahead and applied for the variance for the location above the third level, and they were approved in addition to the size. But that's, you know, this in a similar way what we're going for in general.
And so you said that is a business operation.
Yep, it's an office tenant. Yep, that building is an office tenant, is a multi-tenant office building.
Is that fourth floor there?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Octo, below the Octo sign is first floor, and then second, and then third and fourth. But it's mounted on the fourth. And I'll just point out, just because the Foundry, that's also a multi-tenant office. There is ground floor retail, obviously, and then 312 Plum, 312 Elm are also multi-tenant office buildings. Let's see, does that cover our example?
I think so. I had a couple other ones
Oh,
that
yeah.
just kind of came up after the fact, and these are more about size signage, not necessarily could be or could not be third or fourth floor, but there's projection signs on the new Kroger downtown. You got multiple projection signs that are larger than 8 foot in height. And then we both talked about the 3 CDC large electronic message centers that are mounted on buildings. That I'm sure they got special approval as well, but they're monstrous. And in some cases, like the one on 7th Street, which it's kind of interesting to me, being a sign guy, that it actually is over top of it's over the road. So it's not even like, it's not on sidewalk, it actually projects over 7th Street. So just thought bring that up, just more of a size variance. I believe the one on Central Parkway, 1, 2, 3, it is above the 4th floor, above the 3rd floor, kind of space between the 3rd and 4th floor level. If you want a copy of these photos,
Yeah.
but just some more to add to the testimony. And I think it just shows that there's been a precedent set all over downtown for projection signs, whether they're at the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, or 4th floor level.
And whether they're office tenants, hotels, or retailers, it seems like, what we're asking for is well within the bounds.
And quite honestly, the variances we're asking for are not extreme. Based on some of the other approvals that have been made, similar type signs. One here that the sign height of 26 feet in height below, and that was below the 3rd floor level. The 2 signs, or the 1 sign was above the 3rd floor level. Actually, there were 2 20 square foot tall signs for the hotels. I think the other one that was approved, bear with me. One was much larger and at a higher. One projecting sign 24.9 feet in height, installed at the 3rd floor level. So that was taller than 8 feet. And I think the other example, but it met both above the 4th floor and much taller. I think it was the Renaissance, one. So, I mean, definitely approvals that have been made in the past for signs well in excess of what we're asking for. In some cases, as well at above the 3rd floor level. So,
And I would add, just because we didn't talk about this one, that's on Peter's Way. That's a building not quite as large, but it's a multi-tenant office building. Obviously, the precedent has been set that 4 blade signs, were approved, which 4 blade signs is, would have required a variance for. I believe that's in the downtown district code or zoning rather. So that's a good example where the city approved an overloading of blade signs for office tenants in that building at 302 West 3rd. The amount of blade signs and exterior signage in that part of downtown is very limited. So as a playing devil's advocate, why should we add another sign in downtown? Does that degrade the look and feel of downtown? It certainly doesn't, not in that area. I'm reserved in other parts of downtown, but given it the lack of office in that western corridor, that's why we're applying for this and feel that it's within the realm of getting approved, given the fact that the signage on that building is so limited to only gray that tenant on the marquee of the building, with no others, while the precedent has been set next door that Cal has a crown sign and SHP has a blade sign, then this is within the realm of a reasonable ask. Is there anything else you wanted to go through on this page?
I think when you go through the kind of the criteria of the variance, I think we basically kind of specified in there and answered some of those questions, and based also on some of the previous cases and testimonies and findings of fact. I mean, we kind of followed pretty much all those same findings of fact and safety, and it's not going to impede the neighborhood. We go through the whole findings of fact. Our sign is no different than any of those other blade signs, pretty much we feel.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very cautious with signs. Signs are very site specific, use specific. I mean, what I think about is, I think I've said this probably before. I don't see some of these electronic messaging signs that are up. I think over the top.
I live next to one, so.
And what I think about when I think about really any signage variance is particularly downtown is the press. So let me pose this to you. Do you think that every office tenant in downtown should be able to install with a sign that's at the fourth floor?
Absolutely not. And I think for those who it's been approved to, it has to do with their, I think, impact to the city and more importantly, their size of tenancy within that building. So
Any office tenant that needs a certain square footage or number of employees or revenue a year should be able to have those benches over ones that don't need those benches.
well, if you had I guess if you're asking, if you had a building that had 50 tenants in it, should the largest tenant and the second largest tenant have the signage rights? Yes, absolutely, given the impact they have to the city. And with that, at 302 West Third, because Dark Points is such a large tenant there at over 17,000 feet, where the average floor plate is 20,000, 22,000 feet, they obviously take up a significant portion of that building up, with Gray as the anchor tenant of that building taking up, I think, over 2 floors of the building. That's why that landlord reserved the right to give them the opportunity for exterior signage with the existing code in place, that they would have the right to do that. And so,
For the landlord to provide that as an incentive to try to keep Dark Points. Is that what you're saying?
we did get a letter of support, and that was a major consideration for their long-term renewal in Cincinnati, was if we renew here for 15 years and continue to invest in the infrastructure in this building and in the IT and security needs of the tenants in the region, then we'd like a statement of support from the landlord. And at which point we were able to get that from the landlord, who was very, very courteous and supportive of that because of their presence at that building, but also in what they do for British Cincinnati. So that's where that statement of support comes from. And to answer your question again, if you had a 2,000 square foot tenant and a 150,000 square foot building, that landlord will not support that 2,000 foot tenant for exterior signage because they are limited in the amount of signs they can have. So they want to reserve those for tenants that are making the largest impact in the city. And so that's why there's one sign on it right now, Gray, and that's why we're able to get the support for a second for Dark Points.
Okay. I'm just trying to parse out the meter interest for the signage. I think what I'm hearing is that it will help with wayfinding for clients that come to visit Dark Points right now, and also that
From an advertising standpoint, brand recognition is a major component to their operation as a data center. I gave you a list of a couple clients of theirs in British Cincinnati.
doesn't it start to get kind of subjective, though? Start clients and
No, but what I was going to go by that was what they can share as far as who they work with is very limited because of the nature of their business being so. It's similar to a bank, confidential information. But by that, because they fly under the radar as far as who they talk about and where they're advertising. It's important for wayfinding, but also for brand recognition in Cincinnati that they exist because of the limited capacity they can go out into the market and share who they are and what they do.
I got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Want to give Matt an opportunity to weigh in. Is there anything else you guys want to say before Matt?
We can speak again after he talks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no chance to respond to any of his comments. Make any follow ups. Yes, more questions.
Yeah, I think most of what you presented, I've read and I'm familiar with. There's one question I may ask. Can you elaborate on you said the sign is being requested in connection with the renewal of their lease?
So in the
Am I right on that?
correct in the document, which was finalized a couple weeks ago or a month ago, we just had that signed. And so their investment in Cincinnati is secure. So in that document, it says that the letter of support was in connection with the renewal, which was actively being finalized. They just did finalize that. So their commitment to Cincinnati is for the next 15 years.
So they've already renewed their lease,
They just did, yes.
and because they renewed their lease, the building owner wrote a letter of support for the sign on the building.
Their letter of support, well, obviously as a landlord, you support your tenants who pay rent. So as a landlord, that I think is justifiable that if you stay to continue to invest in our building in Cincinnati, we're going to write your support letter, which they did. So.
Sure. I have a question for you. Would a wall sign be separated by lighting?
Yeah, you could have a street level wall sign.
If they want to install a wall sign against the facade there instead of a blade sign at the same level with that.
At the street level.
You know,
I believe the code reads that they have to be a tenant on the ground floor. And if I can comment on that, the main reason for the blade, like we talked about the location of it with that on-ramp, limiting the visibility. I don't know if we could go to maybe the rendering of our design at the top there. But I think it is important to mention that if it was a wall-mounted sign, you wouldn't be able to see it. The pedestrian traffic on the western quarter of downtown, we've all walked on 3rd Street to the Bengals game. Once you get below 3rd Street, you're really walking into, an industrial area where it's all parking lots. And so there's no places where pedestrians would, by chance walk by and see the sign and realize that they're in the building. And so this allows, one, if you're driving, you can see it. Two, if you're walking by, on the ground level on 3rd Street, you could also see it where how many times have we walked past a flat front sign that's high up in the air and not see it.
So is this essentially the view you're talking about? Like once you're down here on 2nd or towards the banks as you're walking along here?
No, it would.
You can't see the sign if it were lower.
Correct. If it was, well, we're on 2nd. I was referring to 3rd Street.
And while we're getting there, just to clarify the wall light question, actually speaking on the fact that the tenants on the 4th floor, they don't always have the wall sign.
So this is a great corridor where a lot of folks are walking down the banks for lunch or to a game. Most of the time, generally folks aren't walking any further than Elm or Plum Street. If you're standing right here walking to a game, if it was a flat front sign, you could see on the building that Dark Points had a sign there. Similar to Cal, who is on the top crown of 312 Plum there at the larger building. You can see their white logo there. It's hard to distinguish. And you can see where the on-ramp starts to go up and to the right. It really is limited. If you were, if we had a sign lower than the fourth level, that would block, any signage from the west. Looking at the west, you couldn't see the sign, and only from the east you could see it. And if you're on the expressway ramp, you wouldn't be able to see it. Correct. Yes.
Okay, I mean,
Right.
yeah, I mean, this is very, unscientific here, just going on Google Maps. But,
We did measure that.
Just trying to, better sense of it.
That's a great example there of that angle of the blade sign of SHP. If you look at the green available sign, it's just to the left in the little blue mark there, and you can see the,
Up the street.
yeah,
Oh, up here.
but you can see it. Yep, exactly right. You can see SHP's sign there. And then if we look back at the 302 building and notice the top crown in the red there, that's gray. That's the gray, also known as WPP. They recently renewed the building and consolidated there. And with the exception of gray, there's no other exterior signage.
Yeah, I mean, to your point on the wall sign, I've never seen that gray sign before in my life. I don't know how it's been there, but I've never noticed it. I have one on the other side, noticed the cow, but
And
when we're talking about the view from here, I don't understand how the fourth floor makes any difference.
well, again, I mean, rather than the third or the second floor, because I think there's a major difference there. There on the second floor, you would absolutely be constricted from view standpoint if you were anything further than the on-ramp looking east. You can see it.
So through that intersection up there.
Mhm.
Got it. Okay.
And that's the Inquirer building. That was where we talked about the Inquirer, all their signage, and then USI's got the blade as well. So again, I mean, lastly, we all can see that and know that the western corridor of downtown is very quiet from a foot traffic standpoint. And, generally you're probably just going to walk by it for Bengals game, and putting an emphasis on that variance of size and location, being on the fourth level, you can see it because generally you're probably only driving past that and would miss it otherwise if it was lower, especially if you're going on the on-ramp, and certainly would miss it if it was a flat sign, because that little building there, Audie's or Rule the Jungle, it's hard to distinguish what that flat sign says there in that instance. So that's why it needs to be a blade, among the other reasons we covered.
Okay, I think Matt, I cut you off there.
You're fine. No, I was just curious. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we understand the unusual condition with the ramp being there. It does go up at its highest point right in front of this building, and it does sort of limit pedestrian traffic and limit visibility to an extent. So I think it's worth additional consideration for that reason. So the hardship of the ramp being even with the second floor of the building, for that reason, we support a variance to allow the sign to be above that, to allow the sign to be at the third floor. There's not been a hardship presented to justify the sign being any higher than that. And we are concerned that having a sign that's halfway up a pretty tall building downtown makes it seem like a building identification sign. Additionally, the size and building identification signs are limited to wall signs and only one. So we think that the ramp is an unusual condition. We would support letting the sign be above the height of the ramp. So instead of being below the third story, we would support the sign being at the third story or below the fourth story.
So maybe halfway between 3 and 4 is adequate.
There's
I see that right now.
even with where the third floor windows are there's a rendering on the last page of the staff report. So that's our recommendation. showing the sign at the permitted height of 8 feet, 1 story taller so that it can be seen above the ground. There's not been any justification presented to us as to why it should be more than 8 feet. The zoning code limits projecting signs to 8 feet. Not really any hardship to justify a taller sign. We understand that it could be seen from a distance. However, projecting signs downtown are meant to be seen from adjacent rights of way. It's meant for someone that's driving down the street right in front of it or walking down the sidewalk to say, oh, there's the business I'm going to. Projecting signs downtown are not meant to serve as building ID signs. They're just meant for wayfinding for people that are already, driving or walking to that business. Having a projecting sign that's visible from several blocks away or for people that are driving through Cincinnati on the highway does not really serve that purpose because there's no direct access from the highway to this property. So a wayfinding sign that is visible from the highway does not necessarily serve the same purpose. We understand there are some other signs around downtown that are taller, but downtown's a historic, dense, diverse urban area. I mean, there's buildings and signs that are 100 years old or more. There's all different types of signs from stadiums to small businesses to condos. So I see your examples that some other signs are beyond what the zoning code allows, but in making our interpretation, we have to go by what the zoning code allows. We can't just look at what other signs are out there that may have been built under different criteria or may have received variances because of site-specific conditions that apply to those properties, but do not apply to this one. So with no hardship being presented to justify a sign more than 8 feet, we would just go by what the zoning code permits. But we would support it being a little bit taller to help navigate the hardship of that ramp going in front of it.
Anything else, Ryan?
No.
Emily, you just approve? Yeah. Okay. All right. You want to respond?
Yeah, I mean, I have a concern about an 8-foot sign. I mean, if an 8-foot sign, if you scale that, the sign that we presented at 8 feet, it would be so small. The lettering would be so small. I didn't scale it to 8 feet, but if we did scale it to 8 feet, you're talking about a lowercase letter that might be, 3 or 4 inches tall on an 8-foot high sign. The width of the sign probably would scale down to like maybe 14 inches or 16 inches. And that's a really small sign. That would even make it even that much more difficult to see the sign if we're talking about visibility. And I guess my question would be, why is this any different than any other sign that was approved that's much larger? Talking about historical buildings and whatnot. I mean, talking about a historical area, you would think a sign that's 25 or 26 feet in height in a historical area would be a detriment to the historical area. So, I mean, here we're talking about the south end of downtown Cincinnati, where I would consider it not as historical as up on Vine Street or wherever it is where the hotels are.
Right.
And so I don't see this as much of a detriment as I would see like
The
the curiosity sign on a corner of
historic building.
a historical area. So I don't quite understand why this is any different than any other sign that's been approved in the past. Much larger than we're talking about a 15-foot sign, where in some cases these signs were 26 feet in height. Yeah, and those are very large signs. So
And the size is important because it needs to be, we need the variance for the size so it can be distinguishable at a distance because of the limits of walkability in that area. Even if you're driving on the expressway, you wouldn't be able to understand that Dark Points is in this building, and you could be coming, southbound and coming into downtown and looking for Dark Points' sign to see where they are and coming in to meet with them, but you wouldn't be able to recognize it if it was an 8-foot sign. Furthermore, if you're, a pedestrian, anything over 2 blocks away, you're not going to recognize their presence there, until you're, more within a block of the building. I think from from the other examples we've shown, clearly, the size is an important wayfinding tool. And even in the core of downtown where, you're generally walking from, block to block, and you can see most signs that you're looking for. This is a particular instance where, this is such an isolated part of downtown. I think the size makes, makes for the case that it should be approved. Granted that in the core of downtown, like at 3067th Street, where Curiosity has, over a 15-foot sign, anybody could see that sign if it was 8 feet tall, but their size variance and locational variance was approved. So because of the isolated location of this building, being on an expressway, surrounded by parking lots, no retail being close by to where any bypasser will be walking by other than a person who might be going to visit our points, the size is an absolutely critical component to this, just because of the location of the building and doesn't deteriorate, the integrity of downtown, given its, far south and west location to the core. Is there anything else, John?
I think I'm just going to bring up too, once again, and you even kind of mentioned it, that you're not a big fan of these electronic message centers, but obviously they were approved for a reason. I'm assuming they're owned by, or it's 3CDC had something to do with those. How can somebody, even if it's council or whoever, approves something like that, that are so big and so illegal, so to speak, per the zoning code? How could those be approved by someone and then something that we're asking for not be approved?
Right.
I just don't.
Particularly when, they're advertising, FanDuel sports betting on those signs 24 hours a day, compared to a legitimate taxpayer downtown area.
Yeah, I think the simple answer to that is just they go through the process. Which the answer, a great answer for you guys as a sign company. I understand that, but very helpful that process. And I'm not off the top of my head exactly sure how every single one of these signs was approved, particularly the large message board signs.
So it concerns me. It concerns me that 2 of those are now in downtown Cincinnati. But what's going to stop for more of them? Every time 3CDC has a building that they want to advertise their parking garage or whatever, that they don't get approval to continue to put these all in Cincinnati. Because you were concerned about who is every office building, should they be allowed to have a blade sign? Well, that really falls back to the landlord controls that as well. Like John had mentioned, he's only going to give potentially a blade sign to majority tenants. So I don't think you're going to see every office tenant, and you're not going to see like blade signs going up for every office tenant in an office building. Plus they have to come back to the BZA. So it all comes down to, it's a case by case scenario of whether you feel that it's necessary for them to have one or not. So it's never going to happen where every office building in downtown is going to have a blade sign for every office tenant.
Right. And what we've seen is a flood of blade signs where, like for the Curiosity building at 36 or 35 Street, like I've shown you, that's a case where, consideration for the historic, aspect of the building was not preserved, and the size, for that matter, wasn't justified because of, the building's, central location in downtown Cincinnati and everybody's ability to see it, whether you're, 10 feet away or, 5 blocks away, whereas 302 West 3rd is on the corner of the city, and I think justifies that size variance. In any case, that is one in particular, given the placement of that building. And, as a historic building, it does have a historic base, but it also has a new, upper level above the 6th floor that was built, I believe by Al Meyer multiple years ago. And so it's, been retrofitted to accommodate for, large users. And as Dark Points is one of those large users, I think, it's important that they are able to be seen, given their place in the city on that western corridor. So
Let me ask you, do you think that office tenants should be treated the same in terms of these signage requests as retail and hotel tenants of buildings?
absolutely, they currently are treated the same way. And the Curiosity sign is a great example. Their sign is no different than the Homewood Suite sign on Vine Street. Same size, particularly the size.
Well, are you contending that there are more regular new visitors to an office than a downtown office suite than there are to a hotel or a retail establishment?
Wayfinding for hotels is important, but a big component for tenants, as an office broker, a big component for tenants in their consideration to be in downtown, pay downtown taxes, and support the retail tenants is recognition that they exist. And so signs are such a critical component, particularly for the large tenants, such as CAL, such as Gray, such as Great American Insurance, such as K&K Law, US Bank, the third, who has a plethora of signs, not just on the top marquee of the building, but on the ground level as well, in multiple locations. US Bank is a great example where they have signs plastered all over the place on the marquee of the building, but also blade wall signage on the skywalk level facing Fountain Square. And the precedent has been set that office tenants are just as important as hotels are, particularly for those visitors that are coming in for meetings. As an office tenant, you have a lot of folks coming in and out. And so that's a big component. Obviously, hotels are important, and directional signage is a component, but equally so is an office tenant.
Gotcha. So ultimately, just as important as the wayfinding for this particular application, the recognition and the willingness to try to keep this business downtown is also
Absolutely.
and the reason why.
In addition to the many others we
Sure. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else? Yeah, I think that's all the questions I have. I can talk about some.
So can I.
I find this from an academic sense to be very interesting. So I wasn't trying to pick a broad.
Sure.
It's just
And I'm on the other side of the fence too. So I'm on the BZA and City of Blue Ash. So I'm on your side of the table in a lot of cases as well. And we know that, a lot of the cases that come before BZA are sign cases. We deal with it every day.
Yeah, and I mean, I find it tricky to try to find where that line is, where that comes. Yeah, I don't know about mechanics, how it works with landlords, but I would suspect that if a landlord could incentivize a lease by promising to sign it, they would, but they don't. They can't.
Exactly. They would have to, before somebody would even sign a lease in a building, they would do their due diligence and find out what's the process to get a sign.
And in this case, Dark Points has already committed to Cincinnati, which, obviously, as a landlord, you're going to try to lure a tenant into downtown with a sign, the right to have a sign up. But in this case, Dark Points has shown their commitment to Cincinnati. And as a result of that, are pushing for this as well. And I'm a downtown resident. I live on Central Parkway, and I'm not a huge fan of downtown signs. And I live across the street from the Central Parkway, Kroger extended, advertising sign that's got 25 million LEDs on it, and it drives me crazy. So as a downtown resident, I resonate with the fact that not all signs and sign variances are good, but in this case, where it's out of the way, facing the expressway, and in a desolate part of downtown, and for the reasons I stated why Dark Points should have it, I think it's just such an important, reason why the sign should be approved and the location should be approved, given their commitment to Cincinnati and what they do for the greater Cincinnati region. So I don't have any other comments. I don't know if there's an ability to amend the size, but we absolutely would like that to happen.
Say the last part again.
If I don't know what the decision to limit the size or keep the size the way it is final, but
Oh, that was just our recommendation.
So, yeah, they're just recommending from the zoning department.
Okay.
I have to make the ultimate determination.
Okay.
Some of these decisions you've included, some of them are from my predecessors. I think at least one of them here is from me. So this will be the official
okay.
Adjudication, if you will, of the application. And I can choose to approve both, approve one, approve conditions, all that sort of thing. So unless there's anything else.
I just want to make one last comment for the record. I mean, we're talking about Curiosity sign, which is an office tenant. And we're talking about Dark Points, which is an office tenant. And Curiosity is in the CBD, and they have a much larger sign at a higher level, and that was approved. So there's really, I can't see any difference between that precedent. Sorry,
I think that is your best argument. That is it's a curious case for lack of a better word there.
Curiosity.
Yeah, so let's leave it at that. Let me spend a little bit more time with this. I'm going to go get on the ground. I think I read that the zoning department went down and actually did a site visit. I think that'd be worthwhile here. I mentioned at the beginning that this would take about 2 weeks. I'll get something to you guys within the next couple of weeks. What I do is, as soon as I make a decision, I formalize that in a written decision, which will contain all my reasoning for my decision, what the law is on these, which you guys have a panel on already, and then any conditions that I want to attach to the sign, I'll also have on there. Once you have that, if it's approved, then you can work with zoning to get the permits approved. If it's denied or a portion is denied, and you guys want to appeal that to the BZA, which would be the reviewing body of review, you can do that to try to get the approval if anything is denied. But otherwise, yeah, any questions about this? That's great. Yeah. And yeah, like I said, I'll email that to you really tomorrow. So you guys will have it right away. If you want a status update or you have any questions about the process or anything, in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to answer any questions you have or give you a status update. I can't take any new information once this hearing is closed, and so I'll admit these into the record and add these as part of your packet. But what we have now will be the complete record that all these.
I learned that in our appeal process last time. So
Yeah.
That's why we wanted to make sure we tried to present as much information as we could. Absolutely.
Probably fit an hour and a half.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll close it out.